They said Ingrid Halvorsen had built a coffin full of firewood, because she stacked her winter fuel inside the walls of her own house. Then the blizzard came, and the warmest room in the valley was the one they had laughed at. Ingrid Halvorsen was not trying to build something clever, she was trying not to bury her son. The first winter after her husband died had taught her everything she needed to know, and none of it was gentle. The cabin Eric had built was considered good work: tight logs, solid roof, proper hearth. By every standard in the Dakota Territory, it should have been enough. It wasn't. The cold did not arrive all at once, it pressed in, night after night, quietly taking more than the fire could replace. By mid-December, the temperature held below zero for days at a time, wind moved across the plains without interruption, finding every weakness in the structure. Ingrid learned quickly that a fire does not warm a house first, it fights it. Every log in those walls was cold. Every seam, every surface, pulling heat away faster than the stove could give it. Her son, Nels, slept in his coat, 2 blankets, boots beside him in case he needed to move quickly. Still, he woke shivering. Ingrid would wake before dawn, press her hand against the north wall, and feel the truth of it. Not cool, not cold, but draining, as if the house itself were carrying warmth away, feeding it into the wind outside. She stuffed rags along the baseboards, sealed gaps with whatever she could find. By morning, they were stiff with frost, a bucket of water set across the room would freeze at the edges overnight. Not solid, but enough to remind her, the heat was never staying. She burned through wood faster than anyone she knew. Days spent cutting, hauling, stacking. All of it, just to hold the room near 40 degrees. 40, not comfort, not safety. Just survival. At night, when Nels finally slept, she would sit beside the stove and watch the flame. Not for warmth, for understanding. Because the fire was not failing, it was being emptied. The faster the wind moved, the faster the walls gave up what little heat they had. That was the part no one talked about. The house was not protecting them, it was leaking, and the wind was taking everything it could. That thought stayed with her, not as fear, but as a question. Back in the islands where she had grown up, the houses had been different: stone walls, thick enough that you could sit inside the cold, and still feel warmth hours after the fire died. Not because the fire was stronger, because the walls held it. And between those stones, they packed wool, turf, anything that stopped air from moving. Still air, kept heat, moving air, killed it. She had not thought about it in years. Not until she felt the Montana wind take heat straight through wood. Like it wasn't even there. That was when the idea began to form. Not bigger fire. Not more wood. Less loss. If the walls were the problem, then the walls had to change. She could not build in stone. There was none nearby. But she had something else. Wood. Wool. And time. Before the next winter came, she began to imagine it slowly. One wall. Inside another. A space between them. Not empty. Never empty. Filled with something that would not let air move. Something that could hold heat. Instead of giving it away. Not just a house that burned fuel, but a house that kept it. The idea sounded wrong. Even to her. But the cold had already proven something worse. Doing it the normal way was not enough. She looked across the small room. At her son sleeping under layers that barely worked. At the thin walls that could not protect him. At the stove fighting a battle it could not win. And in that quiet, the decision made itself. She would not build a better fire. She would build a house that did not lose to the wind.
She began in the spring, before the ground had fully dried, before anyone else had started building, because what she was about to do could not be rushed. The first thing she needed was not wood. It was space. A second structure. Not beside the first. Around it. That was what made people stop their horses. They saw her measuring out a footprint, far wider than her cabin needed. Too wide. Too heavy. Wrong. Ingrid did not explain. She bought what she could. A failed homestead had left behind a half-built frame. Rough pine boards. Warped in places. Cheap. $12. Enough. She dismantled her old cabin carefully. Not destroying it. Reusing it. Every log lifted. Cleaned. Set aside. Because the outer wall had to be strong. The inner wall had to be tight. And the space between them had to be deliberate. She laid a wider foundation first. Field stone. Placed by hand. Not just to hold weight, but to hold distance. 16 inches. All the way around. That gap mattered more than anything else she would build. Because that gap was where the house would either fail or survive. The outer wall came first. Heavy logs, stacked high, gaps left intentionally, not sealed, not finished, because the outer wall was not meant to keep heat in. It was meant to take the wind, to absorb it, to slow it. Then came the inner wall, pine boards, tight, continuous, sealed as carefully as she could manage. This was the real boundary. Not the logs. The air inside this smaller room. The living space. Everything outside of it was part of the system. By midsummer, the structure stood complete in shape. A house inside a house. A strange, thick-walled form that looked more like a fortress than a home. And now came the part no one understood. She left openings along the outer wall. Small access points, and through them, she began passing firewood inside. Not stacking it outside, not storing it in a shed. Inside the walls, piece by piece, split oak, dry pine, seasoned, stacked tight, like bricks, from floor to ceiling, 16 inches thick. A full wall of fuel. Neighbors stopped to watch. At first, with curiosity. Then with concern. Then with something closer to certainty. She's wasting it, one man said quietly. That wood will never stay dry in there. Another shook his head. Even if it does, one spark and the whole place goes up. Ingrid did not respond. She kept stacking. Because what they saw was storage. What she was building was something else. Mass. Weight. A heat reservoir. Wood does not transfer heat quickly. But it holds it. And enough of it holds a great deal. She wasn't just saving fuel. She was placing it where it could change the behavior of the house itself. Where the cold hit hardest the north and the west, she built solid. Dense. No empty space. No movement. Because those were the wind walls. The ones that had stolen everything the year before, the other sides, she treated differently. South. East. Less exposed. There, she used the wool. 6 heavy sacks, bought cheap from a sheep ranch. Dirty. Greasy. Full of lanolin, unfit for spinning, unwanted. Perfect. She pushed it into the cavity by hand, then with a stick. Then with both. Packing it tighter, and tighter, until it resisted. Until it stopped shifting.
until it became something dense enough to trap air, but still able to breathe. Because moisture would move, she knew that. It always does. And if it stayed, the walls would rot. The wool would not stop vapor, but it would stop water. The lanolin coating each fiber, repelling it, letting the walls stay dry. That was the difference, not blocking everything. Allowing the right things to pass, stopping the wrong ones. A man rode past one afternoon. Watching her pack the wool deep into the wall. "Looks like you're building a nest," he called out. "For rats." Ingrid didn't look up. She pressed another bundle into place. "Better than a cold house," she said quietly. He laughed. Because what she was doing looked absurd, wood hidden in walls. Dirty wool packed like insulation. A house too thick. Too strange. Too different. By early autumn, the structure was sealed. From the outside, it looked heavy. Overbuilt. Unusual. From the inside, it was simple, clean pine boards. No sign of what filled the walls. No hint of the system holding it together. Her brother-in-law, Einar, came to see it. He walked around the cabin slowly, hand brushing the logs. Measuring something he couldn't quite name. "This isn't how it's done," he said finally. "No," Ingrid replied. "It isn't." He looked at her, concerned. Tired. "They're saying things," he added, "about you." She nodded once. "I know. They think you've lost your sense." She glanced toward the door, where her son was sweeping the floor inside. "They can think that," she said. He followed her gaze. Then looked back at the house. At the thickness, at the weight of it. At the walls filled with something no one else would put there. "You're certain this will work?" he asked. Ingrid paused, not long. "Just enough. More certain than I was last winter," she said. That was the only answer she needed. Because she had already seen what failure looked like, and this was not that. The first cold did not prove her right. It only proved she was different. By early November, the temperature began to drop. Not sharply, not violently. Just enough to remind everyone what was coming. Frost held through the morning. Water stiffened at the edges. The wind returned. Not strong yet, but steady. Ingrid lit her stove that first night, and waited. Not for warmth, for behavior. The fire caught easily. The small iron stove glowed, just as it had the year before. But this time, something changed. The heat did not disappear as quickly. It didn't rush toward the walls and vanish. It stayed, not completely, not perfectly, but longer. That was enough to notice. She placed her hand against the inner wall. Pine. Smooth. Warm. Not hot, but holding. That was new. Before, the walls had felt like ice. Now, they felt like something between. Neutral. Steady. The difference was small, but small differences grow in winter. Nels noticed it too. He sat at the table that night, hands resting flat on the wood. "They don't hurt," he said quietly. Ingrid looked at him. "What doesn't?" "My fingers," he said. "They don't hurt like before." She nodded. Did not smile. Because this was only the beginning. Across the valley, others were preparing the way they always had. More wood stacked. More fires built. More effort poured into keeping heat alive. The same pattern. The same assumption. That warmth had to be created faster than it was lost. Ingrid did something else. She slowed the loss. Night after night, she watched the same thing happen. The fire would burn, then settle, then fade, and still,
The room did not collapse into cold. It drifted. Slowly. Gently. Like something held back. Because it was. The walls were no longer empty. They were full. Full of wood. Holding heat. Full of wool. Stopping movement. The wind still struck the outside. Harder now. Colder. But it no longer reached inside the same way. It hit the outer logs. And stopped. Or slowed. Or lost itself in the mass. That was the difference. Not stopping the cold entirely. Making it take longer. By late November, people began to notice small things. Her chimney smoke. Thin. Steady. Not the thick black clouds that came from fires pushed too hard. A rider passing her place slowed. Watching. He had spent the day fighting the cold. Feeding his stove constantly. Burning through wood faster than he could cut it. And here, the smoke barely moved. Lazy. Controlled. It didn't make sense. He rode on. But he remembered. The real difference showed at night.
And held. Ingrid would bank the fire low, not roaring, not desperate, just enough. Then she would sit and listen. The silence inside the cabin was different now. The wind was still there, but distant, muted. As if it had to work harder, just to be heard. Mel slept without his coat. Still under blankets, but lighter, less burdened. Less afraid of waking cold. Ingrid watched him, more than she watched the fire. Because the fire could lie, a strong flame can hide failure. But sleep tells the truth. And for the first time, his sleep was steady. Unbroken. That mattered more than temperature, more than wood. More than anything she could measure. Still, the valley did not change its mind. Not yet. Because nothing had failed, not visibly. Not completely. Their cabins still stood. Their fires still burned. Their methods still worked, for now. That was always the problem. Winter does not break things at the beginning. It waits. Builds. Takes slowly, until there is nothing left to take. By early December, the cold deepened. The wind sharpened. And something shifted in the air. Not visible, but felt. Ingrid stood outside one evening, looking across the valley. Smoke rising thick and dark from every cabin. Fires pushed too hard, too often, too desperate. She turned back toward her own home. Thin smoke, low flame, steady. And behind those walls, something the others did not yet understand. Not a stronger fire. A slower loss. That was when she knew. Not hoped, not guessed. Knew. That when the real winter arrived, this house would not behave like the others. The real winter did not arrive quietly. It came all at once. The temperature fell past anything the valley had seen that season. And did not come back. Not the next day. Not the next week. For days. Then weeks. It stayed below zero. The wind did not stop. It never stopped. It scraped across the plains. Lifting snow like sand. Driving it into every crack. Every seam. Every weakness. This was no longer winter. This was a siege. Across the valley, the difference began to show. Not in a single moment, but in the way people moved. Faster. Shorter. Closer to their fires. Cabins that had felt safe, now struggled to hold anything. The Colby house burned through wood at a rate no one had planned for. 2 cords a month. Just to keep the rooms above freezing. Men who had cut all summer, now watched their stacks shrink too quickly. Too visibly. Too soon. Inside those cabins, the walls turned cold. Not gradually. Immediately. Heat pushed out as fast as it was made. Fires roared. But never won. Windows frosted from the inside. Thick. Opaque. Breath turned to ice at the edges of blankets. Families moved into single rooms. Closed doors. Layered clothing. Burned more. Always more. And still, it wasn't enough.
Jedediah Stone, the man who had laughed the loudest, found his chimney clogged with thick black residue, green wood, forced burning, smoke backing into the cabin. His family spent 2 nights in the barn, huddled among animals for warmth. His youngest girl coughed through the night. The cold did not just threaten. It stayed. It pressed. It waited. And it took. Marcus Pike, the builder, began making rounds. Not as a craftsman, as a carrier. His sled loaded with firewood, moving from house to house. Emergency supply. A thing no one had expected to need. He saw it all. Families wrapped in coats inside their own homes. Hands blackened with soot. Eyes tired. Fires burning without rest. And still losing. Always losing. Then, they began to notice something strange. Ingrid Halverson's chimney. The smoke was different. Thin. Light. Almost lazy. Not the thick black struggle of a fire being pushed too hard, but the steady breath of something controlled. At first, no one said anything, because it didn't make sense. Then a rider passed her place. He saw her step outside. 40 below. He was wrapped in fur and wool. Face barely visible. Ingrid wore a shawl. No heavy coat. She moved calmly. Not quickly. Not urgently. Like the cold. Was not chasing her. That stayed with him. He told someone. They told others. And the question began to form. How? By the 3rd week. For curiosity. It was concern. Then disbelief. Einar Halverson could not ignore it anymore. He loaded his sled with wood, food, supplies. Certain he would find them struggling. Or worse. The journey was slow, wind cutting across the open land, snow deep and shifting. By the time he reached her cabin, his hands were numb even inside gloves. He stepped down, walked to the door, knocked hard, once, twice, ready to force it open if needed. The door opened, and the warmth hit him. Not sharp, not dry, not the blast of a desperate fire. Deep, even, still, like stepping into a different season. He froze in place. Not from cold, from shock. Ingrid stood in the doorway. Calm, steady. No strain in her face. No urgency in her voice. "Come in," she said softly. He stepped inside, and the world changed. The wind vanished. Not gone. Muted. Distant. Like something outside a thick wall. The air inside held. Did not rush. Did not move. The stove in the corner glowed. Low. Banked. Not fighting. Working. At the table. Nels sat reading. No coat. No blankets. A simple shirt. Einar stared. Because his own children slept wrapped in everything they owned. And still woke cold. He walked slowly toward the wall, placed his hand against it. Warm. Not from the fire. From itself. The heat held in it. Stored. Released. Slowly. "How often are you feeding the stove?" he asked. "Every 4 or 5 hours." Ingrid said. "I bank it at night." He shook his head. Not believing. Not understanding. He looked at the thermometer. 68 degrees. He stared at it, then at the door, then back at the room. Outside, 40 below. Inside, 68. A difference so large, it should not have been possible. A few days later, Marcus Pike arrived, sled full of wood, ready to help, ready to confirm what he already believed, that she had built something that would fail. He stepped inside. And stopped. The same silence. The same warmth. The same impossible calm. He did not trust it. He went back to his sled. Returned with his own thermometer. Set it on the table. Waited. Watched. 15 minutes. 67 degrees. He walked to the wall. Ran his hands along it. Pressed his ear against it. felt the difference. Not just insulation. Mass. Still air. No movement. No loss. He stepped back, looked at Ingrid, and for the first time, he understood. He had not been building houses. He had been building thin boxes, trying to hold heat inside them. She had built something else. A system that let heat escape in the first place. He exhaled slowly, shook his head. 70 years, he said quietly. We've been doing this wrong. And in that moment, the laughter ended. Not because she had argued, not because she had explained, because the cold had proven it for her. After that, no one called it foolish anymore. They called it something else. Quietly, carefully, because what had once been laughed at had become something they needed. The visits began slowly. Not crowds. Not all at once. One family. Then another. Men who had built their homes with confidence, now standing in Ingrid's doorway, waiting. Not to judge. To ask. Mrs. Colby came first. Her hands trembling, not from cold, but from strain. We're losing the house, she said. Not collapsing. Not broken. But failing. Cold creeping in faster than they could fight it. Wood disappearing. Strength fading. Ingrid listened. Did not interrupt. Did not rush. Because she already knew. The problem was not their effort. It was their design. She could not rebuild their home. Not in winter. Not in that cold. But she could change how it behaved. She showed them what to do. Not complicated. Not perfect. A second frame along the windward wall. A rough cavity, filled with whatever they had. Straw, packed snow, loose wood, anything that could slow the air. Anything that could stop movement. It wasn't her system. Not fully. But it was enough. That night, the Colby house rose 15 degrees. Not warm, but survivable. And in that winter, that was the only difference that mattered. Word spread, not as gossip, as fact. The numbers carried it. The measurements. The impossible comparison. One house, burning less than a quart a month, holding near 70 degrees. Others, burning a quart a week, barely reaching 40. The difference was not effort. It was understanding. By the time the thaw came, the valley had changed. Not in what they had, but in how they saw it. Wood was no longer just fuel. It was structure. Wool was no longer waste. It was insulation. Air was no longer invisible. It was the thing that decided everything. That summer, cabins were opened. Walls removed. Frames extended. Cavities built. Filled. Packed. Changed. They began to call them Halverson walls. Not as praise. As reference. A way to describe something that worked. Owen Mercer, the county man, returned with a notebook instead of instructions. He measured everything. Thickness. Density. Fuel use. Temperature. Because this was not theory. It was proof. He wrote it down. Sent it outward. And the idea moved beyond the valley. Adapted. Changed. But always the same at its core. Less movement. More mass. Less loss. Years later, when someone asked Ingrid how she had come up with it, she did not stop working. Did not look up. It isn't new, she said. It's just correct. The cold had never been the mystery. It had always done the same thing. Taken what it could. Moved where it was allowed. The difference was finally understanding that. The cabin still stands. Weathered now. Gray logs. Quiet under the sky. But inside the walls, the wool remains. The wood, still stacked. A house that once held heat, still holding its lesson. Not about building stronger, not about burning more, but about keeping what you already have. Some people try to survive winter by making bigger fires. Others learn something quieter, something harder to see. That survival is not about adding more heat. It is about giving the cold less to take. Ingrid Halvorsen understood that, and because she did, the wind never took from her again.